Good morning and welcome back to Built by Bo. So today we are back with the Granada and we are going to put on the 4-barrel manifold as well as the Holley carb and probably get into the fuel pump. I also need to pull the radiator out and have the radiator record because it's leaking a little bit. I did drive the car for a day and did figure out some problems. One of the problems ended up being the Duraspark box. It was what was causing it to run shitty and not being able to rev up. So I had a spare box and put that box in and that cured that problem. As well as I pulled the top off the carburetor while I was in there and it was actually pretty clean. So I put that back together and started up the car and it was actually running pretty good. It still had a little bit of a miss. I ended up driving it a little bit for that day. Ended up getting a bit of smoke coming from the exhaust when it got hot. And there was an intermittent tick that I heard that was coming from somewhere in the valve train. So I pulled both the valve covers off and found that cylinder number 8 had pulled the rocker stud out and the rocker was off to one side. So definitely number 8 was the dead miss. And once I pounded the rocker stud back in and got that back together, the thing runs like $1,000,000. So I'll show you a clip of that. It runs really well right now. And we are now gonna move forward with the 4-barrel manifold and the Holley carb and the fuel pump. So let's get on to that. So as I mentioned, after doing the Duraspark box and fixing the rocker stud on number 8 cylinder, we are now running really good, even with the 2-barrel. She's running real good. Good enough to leave the 2-barrel on probably, but I'm still going to swap over to the 4-barrel with the Holley.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind.
Okay, so I think we have everything unbuttoned here to get the intake off, so let's give this a pry and see how glued on this baby is. And it is solid. Well, we're on to a bigger bar. Oh. So one might begin to suspect that these bolts that are on the stovepipe for the carburetor are maybe intake bolts. And they are. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Now it should come up, no problem. Look at that. Craziness. That is craziness. There we go. So I like to drag the intake out, and then when it gets too heavy, just drop it on top of the battery posts, and it just adds for a little excitement. All right. Well, as you can see, it's pretty clean in here, other than some junk in the coolant jackets here and whatever that we're going to clean out. So a little bit of stuff fell inside, but the valley is pretty dang clean. So I'm going to put some rags down in here. I'm going to clean up the valley here and vacuum up what I can, tidy up the china walls here, and then we'll get the radiator out because we're going to take it into the rad shop. I have a water pump on order, so we're going to do a water pump just because it's been sitting for so long, and then we're going to start reassembly. Okay, once you have your surfaces all cleaned up how you want, we're going to put some silicone around all the coolant ports, just a little bit around all 4 corners on both the heads and the intake. Now, it's not something that everybody does or everybody calls for. It's something I do because I don't want any leaks. So that's what we're going to start to do right now. I'm also going to put a little bit in the corners of the China walls just for the start here, and I'll show you why after. It doesn't have to be a lot, and then you're going to massage it around with your finger, just so it's just a little bit. It doesn't have to be excessive. It's just a thin layer to help seal the coolant jackets. Next, you're going to get your gaskets, and you'll see, well, first of all, the China wall corks, they're junk. Throw them away. Next, just see if your gaskets fit correctly. There is a little notch on the head gasket, as long as it's still there, that this should sit in and fit. It just notches down onto that head gasket, and it just sits it in the correct place so it doesn't move when you put the intake on. Now, the reason I put the dab in the corner is when you put the gasket here and use the silicone to do your China wall, sometimes you can't get right in this corner right there or right in here. So I'll put a little dab in there first just to ensure that the corner gets the appropriate amount that it needs. So all my ports look correct on my gasket. Everything's in place the way it should. Now I'm going to put a decent amount along the China walls instead of using that cork. Okay, now we're ready for that boat anchor we call an intake manifold. So we'll get some silicone around the jackets on that, and we'll try and wrestle it into place. Now, you want to be as precise as possible when you put this down. You don't want to move it. You want to kind of get it in the right spot at the right time, and that's it. So that's what we're going to try and do. Hopefully we're close, because you don't really want to move it. Start by putting some bolts in and seeing if you can line up some holes. And it's normal to have to jiggle it around a little bit to find the right spot, but it should be pretty close. Now we're going to snug up these bolts, working from the center towards the outside. For your tightening sequence is going to be the same thing. Start in the center, work your way to the outside to a crisscross pattern. Now that you have your intake all torqued and back on, you can start with the reassembly if you're ready. What we're going to do is actually continue on with ripping out the water pump and changing the water pump, which is supposed to arrive today. And in order to do that, we have to remove the air conditioning. So while we're in there, we will do the fuel pump that desperately needs to be done. So we'll get that done. And then I have belts and new hoses and everything to go back on this car. I've already redone the valve covers, so those are ready to go back on. And I'm waiting to hear back on the radiator. So we'll get going on ripping out the water pump next, and I'll update you after that. All right, so now we've got the accessory brackets and everything all off. And I'll take them and sandblast and paint them. And now you can see we're at the water pump, so we're going to swap out the water pump, and there is the fuel pump that also needs to be changed. So we'll get those parts and verify that they're correct, and we'll get on them. All right, so we got the water pump off. Unfortunately, we did have one broken bolt here, so hopefully I can get that out. We've got the fuel pump off. So now the first thing to do is to verify the parts. So there's the two water pumps, which I got this water pump from Amazon, but I looked it up myself and put my own part number in. So this is a Gates pump. It does look the same, so that's really good. This is the fuel pump that I got from Rock Auto. Now the main thing is to make sure that your angle of your fork is correct, which it looks very similar. Maybe not in the video like that. You put it up close to it is. Yeah, big difference is that the outlets are different on each pump, but this is just the line that goes up to the fuel pump, and then the other one is just the feed line, which I'm going to replace that piece of hose anyway, so I can change the length of the hose, so that's not a big deal. This is the most important part. So I'm going to work on getting that broken bolt out, and we'll get this thing together. So with a little luck, this happens. I didn't even have to add heat. So lucky. Other than that, is the timing cover off. Awesome. All right, so I've cut the fuel line back to the metal line, and I've added in a fuel filter, and I've added in some new line that's going to go onto the back of the pump in the new position. I've got my pump, and I have put a little bit of RTV on both sides of the gasket, and I cleaned the surface here, so this is ready to go back on. When you go to install it, this cam gear needs to be in one spot. It would be pretty hard for you to screw it up, but there is a rotational camshaft that pushes on this for your fuel pump, so when you put it in, you have to make sure that it fits in there properly. So when you do get it in, it's not going to line up 100% perfect depending on where that camshaft is in there, and you can see right now it's like I can't get the pump lined up straight, but we're gonna get the bolts started and then carefully get it tightened up without making it bind. Now we're all buttoned up, I'll install the feed fuel line. I'm gonna get the timing cover all cleaned up so it's ready for the new water pump. Now on the new water pump, if you're gonna notice, it has this back plate panel here held on with 4 skinny bolts. This gasket has not been sealed by them. I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to put silicone, just a little dab, just a thin skim around the outside of all the ports on the plate and the water pump side, and reinstall it. Then the same for the gasket that goes on the timing cover, just to ensure it doesn't leak, because yes, you do have problems. All right, so we've got the water pump all buttoned up for now, and we've got the fuel pump all buttoned up for now. I still have to run the main fuel up to the carburetor, and I need to get all the bracketry and stuff painted, and we'll start reassembling with that. Now the main thing to remember behind here is there's a bunch of different variations for the gasket between the water pump and the timing cover, and it's very, very important you get the right one. Sometimes the gasket is just out by a little bit, you don't realize, and you have a leak. So very important to verify that the gasket is correct before assembly. Okay, so when it comes to putting the distributor in, I've marked the distributor in a place, marked it there, and I've also marked the rotor. It doesn't really matter where you park it. Best thing to do is line up the timing marks and then pull it, but you can't see the timing marks on here. I have to sand them down and clean them up and find them, and then I'll mark it so I can run a timing light on it after. But anyway, you mark your marks, and when you actually take this out, as you take it out, this drive spins, which turns the oil pump gear. And when you go to put it back in, you might not be able to line it up in that spot because the oil drive is turned slightly. So we're gonna see if we can get it in place, and I'm gonna show you a life hack. So as you can see, I can't get it down in place all the way because the drive isn't lined up with the bottom of the distributor. So you take a long extension with the 5/16 and you tape it on so it doesn't fall inside the engine, and then we're gonna turn the drive slightly and try again. And we've got it perfect. Yeah, I don't know if you can see or not through the camera, but our 2 marks down below line up, and our rotor is lined up with the mark we put on the distributor. So we are good. We're gonna tighten it down, and we'll adjust the timing later. As you can see, here's all our bracketry, sandblasted and painted. We got some new hoses. The one valve cover still needs to go back on. The coil's painted, and some new belts, along with everything else we've got here. So let's get some of this stuff assembled. So that's going to pretty much finish it up for today. We're still waiting for the radiator, so can't really put much more back together. And I have a few little things like the throttle linkage and stuff to figure out, and just a few odds and sods, but we're really close to firing this thing back up. Well, it's a new day, and as you can see, I have a radiator behind me. So the local rad shop, I sent the radiator in. I did do my research beforehand, and I didn't see anything available for the Granada's application from Rock Auto, from anywhere. So I sent it to the local rad shop. They had it for a few days, and they came back and said they wanted about $800 to recore the factory rad. Well, it's, you know, on a restoration project when you need the factory product, and yeah, I could see it. I could see doing that, but with this car, we just don't need to spend $800 on the rad. So I started doing some measurements and stuff. Went over to the Turbo Mustang, had a look at it, did some measurements, and I thought that radiator was going to fit pretty damn close. So I went down to Lordco and I got the Spectra Premium CU556, which is for a 1990 Foxbody Mustang automatic, and we're gonna put it in the car and see how close it is. So as you can see with the Foxbody radiator, it actually sits in the pads pretty perfect. The outlet's a little bit smaller than the Granada one, but it's gonna work. It fits up in the top mounts perfectly. And down on the bottom, the outlet's a little bit lower than it was before, but this is going to work, so this is a good alternative. Okay, so we've got her all in. The only difference I had to do was I had to get an old Foxbody upper rad hose because the outlet on the Foxbody radiator is a little bit smaller, so it can't use the Granada upper hose. But the lower hose works good. The mounting, I didn't have to modify anything. Everything fit into place like it should. Pretty dang happy. Like, I don't know why they don't offer this as a spare possibility, considering it fit right in, and they don't offer anything for the Granada. So we are ready to fire this up with the new 4-barrel. I haven't hooked everything up here on the carburetor yet. I still have the factory cruise control to hook up, and I have to look up a kick down for it. But I did get the throttle ball on, so we are ready to give it a start up and see how she starts. I've already primed the carburetor with fuel, so it should be relatively easy. Give her a few shots of fuel and see what happens. Sure is a lot better. I'd say that's a win. As I mentioned earlier, the last few things I have to do is just get the factory cruise control hooked up and probably get a Holley kit for the Ford kickdown. So we'll get that all set up. Just verify, check for leaks. Everything so far looks pretty good. So next on the list for this car will be brakes. Just checking over brakes. I got to get a heater core in this car so I can hook up the heater core and a few odds and sods, and we'll just continue on getting this car roadworthy. So again, I want to thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe if you like the videos, and throw a comment down if you want. Everything is appreciated, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one.